Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I want to talk about the Utawarerumono PC ports for a little while. Not only because Prelude to the Fallen, which is what you're seeing on screen here, finally came out on PC, but it also had like the either really fortunate or really unfortunate timing of coming out pretty much on the day that Atlas lost the license to Utawarerumono in the West, so the PS4 and Vita versions of Mask and Deception and Mask of Truth are no longer available digitally. So if you want to play the full trilogy, the easiest way to play the game right now, the trilogy right now, is the PC ports. So that's unfortunate. Thankfully, as I record this video, they are all on sale, and they should be for at least the rest of the week. So if you see this footage and decide that you're interested, well, you can go and get them right now. But before I go just spending 5 minutes telling you how amazing Utawarerumono is for like the 5th time, because I've done a lot of videos on the subject, the PC ports. We'll talk about the PC ports. So, for those of you who don't know, the Vita ran at 540p, and the PlayStation 4 ran at 1080p. So, the question is, what would they decide to do for the PC versions when they come over? And so they made a decision. They put them in 720p. And this isn't the sort of 720p like where if you turn it up to 1080p, everything will suddenly internally run at 1080p. No, it runs at 720p all the time. So it just gets stretched a little bit when you are playing in, say, 1080p, for example, like in this gameplay footage. Now, I will point out that in the story bits that you're seeing right now on screen, where you've got the art in the background, the character sprites on screen, dead center, and just the text down the bottom, it's almost unnoticeable. But if you look very closely at the text, you'll see that it's a little bit jagged, a little bit wobbly, like you're looking at it through a little bit of glass that's just smashed a tiny bit. It's still not terrible. It's not even close. I was able to read this text just fine, and I wasn't really being annoyed by it, but it is definitely there. Now, I was expecting the game to suffer a lot worse when it got to the battle sections, which are rendered entirely in 3D. But thankfully, this wasn't really the case either. The battle sections are actually pretty well done. So they are rendered fully in 3D, with 3D character models and all that. They're all moving around, doing their animations, and honestly, it's not that bad either. Now, there are definitely some more visible artifacts of the idea that this runs in an internal resolution of 720p. The main thing being the character models are a bit jagged, so you can see when you look really closely at them, the individual pixels that are around them, and honestly, it's not that bad either. It is a little bit disappointing, but it's absolutely nothing I can't live with. And frankly, I'd hope to think that PC people would be able to say the same about that, because frankly, it still looks really good. The 2D art that is well known for this series and is really well drawn and really put together still pops at 720p. And even the models at 720p still manage to successfully communicate the style and the flair that this series has got. And it still looks great, even if it is a little rough around the edges, quite literally. There are also some other things, like the game doesn't have that much in the way of graphical settings, nor does it have that much in the way of enhancements. Like, a good whiff of anti-aliasing would be able to improve the situation with the internal resolution of 720p immensely. Maybe some anisotropic filtering or just texture sharpening would be able to help with that as well, because, like, admittedly it doesn't look too good when you get too close, but it isn't really a huge deal either, because you're going to be floating all the way up here, and unless you're spending all of your time looking just straight on at the weird textures going on sometimes, like on the floor or on distant environmental objects, it's not really going to bother you, because I went through 2 battles with this system, and frankly, after like 5 minutes of being like, this isn't as good as it could look, I just completely forgot about it. And as I said, there are very few settings in this game's settings menu as well. You get like VSync, you get the ability to run in borderless window, full screen, or whatchamacallit, just windowed, of course, it's just windowed. You start out windowed in 720p, by the way. Little odd, but okay. No real hassle there. Also, only 16:9 resolution as far as I can tell. I only own 1080p monitors, so I don't know how much further it goes beyond 1080p, but it does like 1280 by 720, 1600 by 900, and 1080p. So, there you go. The other option that is mainly PC reliant is what is displayed as the controller input. It does have an automated controller input, but frankly it doesn't work. I had a PlayStation 5 controller plugged in, right? Not a big deal, but it could not, even after I unplugged my PS5 controller, while I was using the keyboard controls, it still didn't recognize that I was using the keyboard controls, so I never swapped to the keyboard controls and I had to go and do that manually. Other than that though, all the other options are the same as they were in the console versions, which are all like good options, like stuff related to the battle system, like being able to see the grid on the floor, speeding up the execution of the animations, things like how fast the text goes, whether or not the protagonist's voice is turned off, which is something that a lot of people prefer, and to be fair, I felt the same way after a little while. You know, things like that. Just the usual set of visual novel options. It's not missing anything in particular. Oh, I will also point out that all the keyboard controls can be rebound. But it's a little weird about it. Because you see, if you saw my video on the Shiren the Wanderer PC port, you'll know that that game did something a little bit weird in which it basically mapped all the controls that were on, say, the console versions. I'm assuming it was the Switch version they ported over, but I can't tell you for sure. But yes, it used the controls from the console versions and just mapped those buttons one-to-one to the game itself. So it ended up being just that little bit weird to control, because it was like you were basically using a gamepad that had been rearranged into a keyboard. It was something you could get used to, but it would take a little bit. This game does the same thing. However, it goes one step beyond and goes from workable to good to great for one reason: good mouse support. While you can navigate everything in this game with WASD keys and use the spacebar to select things, escape to go back and all that, and it's a bit weird, like you can't use the arrow keys in the menus. You'd expect to be able to, but no, you got to use WASD, which I mean makes sense considering your other hand is probably going to be on the mouse anyway. I'm just saying, it's a little odd. But anyway, yes, you can use them, but you can also use the mouse. And the mouse in this game is actually pretty good. You can use it to select menu items, you can use it to pick the grid that your character's moving to, and there's even a couple of other things that the game doesn't really tell you about, at least in the first couple of hours. Because admittedly, I only played the first 3 hours of the PC port, but the PC port did work really well for all that time. No crashes, no skipping of audio, no frame rate drops, no nothing like that, no anything. But yes, you can use the mouse to do everything, even including little things they don't really tell you about. You see, they've kind of bound the mouse in the same way, where clicking with the left button counts as an accept, or like pressing the X button, or the right button is like saying cancel, or the circle button. But they've also done a couple of other things like that, like in the Utawarerumono console versions, holding the cancel button and using the D-pad would rotate the characters that could be rotated at the time. In this game, you hold the right mouse button over the character you want to rotate, and then just drag the mouse in the particular direction. It's a minor thing, but it shows that even when it's a little bit wonky with the way it works, or the way they've ported the controls to the PC, it shows that they were still thinking about how exactly this was going to play on PC. As a result, I can't help but not so much applaud them for it, but at the same time, I'm more than willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, and just say, yeah, this works. This works more than well enough for me personally, and I found myself having basically no problem with it. Again, it can be a little weird, and there are some things that are kind of hard to get used to, like when you move the mouse wheel up and down, that swaps units in battle. So if you're swapping between units to see what they're doing or all that, and you can't use the cursor keys to leave. It's not like, in a control scheme like this, you might expect something like WASD to just move the camera around. But in this game, it counts as moving the selector square. That would normally be on the console, where you need to move it with the like the movement controls. It acts like a cursor like that, and not like just moving the camera on the certain plane to let you see the entire field, although there is a key that lets you see the entire field in just like a 2D form. It can be a little bit weird in that sense, but I'm still not going to say that I wasn't able to get used to it. I think it's absolutely fine as a PC port, although there is one more thing that a lot of people are probably going to get annoyed about. 30 frames per second. Constantly. There's nothing you can do about it, there's nothing you can change. It's just locked at 30. Now, am I annoyed with this? Kind of. Am I understanding of the problem? Completely. Because you see, this game ran at 30 FPS on consoles, and this game has timing related to it. So, whenever you select someone to attack, a little circle goes in, or a little event happens on screen, and you need to click at exactly the right time, and yes, you can click. I do believe you can also press a button, but clicking is just infinitely more natural. But yes, you can just click at the exact right time to set off the critical attack. And this does work. It works quite well. And if they were to up the frame rate to 60 or higher, it might break the timings on this. And when you're coding for a console and you can think to yourself, oh, I don't really need to go above 30 frames per second, I don't need to worry about this, this will be fine. You find yourself thinking when you go to port the game to PC, oh, this might be more effort than it's worth. And it still works. It absolutely still works. I was able to get all the criticals that I wanted to hit, because, I mean, they start out pretty easy and they get pretty difficult as the game goes on. But it still works well enough. I don't have a problem with the way they've set it up. And it comes with a really unique benefit, keeping the game's frame rate at 30 frames per second by default. And that is the fact that this game will run on anything. It is legitimately ridiculous what the system requirements are for this. It's like, I mean, this game did come out on the Vita, right? So it didn't have to have really high specs to begin with, but an Intel Celeron G1820 and Intel HD Graphics 4000, that's like 6 years ago. That's really, really early. Recommended Core i3 3220. That's nothing these days. Any sort of like laptop from the past 6 years is going to be able to run this without trouble. Any desktop from the past 8 is probably going to be able to run this without trouble. And it's going to work fine all the way through. As I said, I played for about 3 hours. I just let the text go for a bit. I tried out the skipping functions in the middle of battle and in the text story parts themselves. And it all worked just fine. It was super quick. All the loading times were practically instant, and it used no resources whatsoever. Like, during the story parts of the game, during the story part of the game was using less RAM than Chrome with one tab on YouTube. By about half. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. They recommend 8 gig of RAM. You could probably get away with 4 gigs. As long as you have nothing else open, but I mean, that's Windows 10 for you. It's a RAM hog just by default. That is really good. That is immensely good. And that is actually like really good news, because it's like, you know, you can recommend this to literally anyone with a computer at this point, right? They could say, oh, this was so cool, but I didn't have a PS4, or I'm in a third world country and I can't afford a PC good enough to play the really big games. You can say, go buy this. It literally runs on potatoes. And they're also really small as well. I bought the entire trilogy when Prelude to the Fallen came out on Steam, because I heard about the delisting. I was planning to do it anyway, but it was just a good enough reason. And the entire trilogy is 15 gig. Prelude to the Fallen isn't even like 4 gig, it's like 3.5. And that kind of makes sense, because again, Vita game, but still just utterly ridiculous how, like, this feels like a game that would have made, what's the word I'm looking for? This feels like a game that would have been, like, top tier, like, 8 years ago. Which, to be fair, the Vita is, like, 8 to 9 years old at this point, so I guess it makes sense. Actually, it's closer to 10. God almighty, I'm old. But look, there are problems with the PC port. I fully acknowledge this. But it's clear that this wasn't a no-effort port. they've done a fair amount of work to get the controls working in a way that makes enough sense so that by the time you get used to them, it's more than easy to work with. It does run at 720p 30, but the art still looks really good, the style still shines through, and the voice acting doesn't appear to have suffered at all. There doesn't seem to be any compression on it whatsoever. All the voice actors seem to be decent enough in their quality. Like, I was playing Muv-Luv Photon melodies earlier, and this is probably more a mastering problem than a PC port problem. But damn, if Maya's lines didn't sound like they were recorded out of a tin can compared to everyone else who sounded more or less fine. Bit depressing, actually, because Maya is, of course, my waifu. But we won't get into that right now. But yeah, it runs at 720p 30, but the game was designed around the 30 frames per second, so I'm willing to let them off on this one, and it still works fine, even at 30 frames a second, and the fact that it runs at 720p 30 means that this game runs on freaking toasters, and it's easily recommendable to everyone that's involved. The one thing that kinda sets me off about it is the price, though. Utawarerumono Prelude to the Fallen on PC? $84.95 Australian. That's like full retail price. Like, hang on. Can I get Utawarerumono Prelude Steam? Let me see if I can find like the Steam prices. 48, yeah, so that would be a full $60 retail release. I know it hasn't been long since Prelude to the Fallen came out. It's been like 6 months or so, right? God damn, that's actually pretty high up there, but thankfully they've kind of made it easy for me. Remember what I said earlier on in the video, that the earlier games are on sale? Well, they are. I mean, I bought the entire trilogy for like 110 Australian dollars, and I don't regret it. Because, well, I got all my copies of the game for free, so, because I originally got review codes for them. So I was like, yeah, I should probably pump some money into this franchise, which I love. But Utawarerumono, Mask of Deception, and Mask of Truth. And I booted up Mask of Deception really quickly to check if the port was the same, and it more or less is the same. Nothing seems to have changed about it. So, this Mask of Deception is currently at 50% off, which is really nice because it's actually the way I recommend you start playing the series, because Mask of Deception was more or less a reboot. Same storyline, but it really does feel like a reboot, because you're starting with a fresh set of characters, you're meeting the old ones, but they're given enough time to introduce themselves, so you play through that, then you get the awesome, like, cliffhanger at the end of Mask of Deception, then you backtrack to Prelude to the Fallen, right? You go back to Prelude to the Fallen, you get the backstory that you need, so that as soon as you come into Utawarerumono Mask of Truth, you know exactly who all these people are, where they came from, and what they were probably doing at the, well, let's just say at the point that Mask of Deception ends. And then everything makes sense, and it leaves you with a bunch of mysteries. Like, it's weird, because some people say Prelude to the Fallen has some mysteries ruined by Mask of Deception, but at the same time, Mask of Deception sets up a lot of mysteries about characters from Prelude to the Fallen, so I reckon it's kind of an even trade when it comes to the two, right? So, if you're actually interested, go get Mask of Deception on Steam. It runs on literally nothing. It's on sale. Well, literally nothing, that's a bad way to say it. It runs on literally anything. It runs on, like, even the most potato-y of potatoes. And it's really cheap right now for what you get. You'll get 40 hours out of it if you sit back and enjoy the story and the voice acting. Then when you're done, or rather you play a few hours and you're like, okay, I don't want this, or refund it, or you play it and I think, okay, I'm going to buy the rest of the trilogy while it's still on sale, then you can play Prelude to the Fallen and Mask of Truth. And should you do that? Of course you fucking should. Why do you think I bought the trilogy for $110 Australian? Do you think I'd be nuts to do that otherwise? Look, the games are exceptional. They are legitimately some of the best visual novels out there, and combined with some really great strategy gameplay thanks to the people at Sting, who are well known for their strategy RPGs. But they've got some absolutely great stories with enjoyable characters, some wonderful style in both the graphics, whether it be like the simple 3D, but it still communicates a sense of style that's great, or the absolutely luscious concept art, not concept art, CGs. I can't remember what that stands for, but the absolutely gorgeous CGs that give every character their own unique personality alone. The voice acting is excellent. The writing and the localizations of all three are great. Hell, the localization of the PC version of Prelude to the Fallen is actually better than what came out on the PlayStation, because they actually updated a couple of the lines to be a little bit less ridiculous, which is, like, weird? Really weird, but okay, cool. I'll give you the thumbs up for that. And as a result, God, what is it even now? It's like 140 hours all up for all the games if you take it slow. The 140-hour experience you get from the entire series is probably one of the best out there in video games. Not even kidding. It puts Cyberpunk 2077's bloody advertisements to shame. And if you really want to know more, I have like 4 or 5 other videos that go a fair bit more in-depth into the gameplay and, what would you call it? Like just the general feel of the Utawarerumono series. Just search for, I believe if you just search for Utawarerumono on this channel, you'll get a bunch of videos related to Utawarerumono. Start with the 2 mask videos, and then move on to the one about Prelude to the Fallen. And don't touch the ones that are called spoiler alert, because I'd rather you not spoil yourselves. With that said, I'm going to let some more footage of the PC version play in the background. It's fine. There is legitimately not enough wrong with it to make it even anywhere near unpalatable. It's perfectly playable. It would be nice to see higher frame rate options, higher resolution options, and maybe a few neat graphics enhancements like anti-aliasing, anisotropic filtering, just the basic stuff to make it look a bit better. But the way things are now, it's more than playable, and I'd be happy to recommend it to anyone in its current state. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.
ここはもしかして畑がいや畑か何かを作ろうとしたのか
どうしてわかったんですか
ほとんど風化しているがあちこちに掘り返したり手を入れた跡が残っているからなしかしこの状態からしてダメだったのか
はい前に何度か畑を作ろうとしたことがあったんですけどどうしてもうまくいかなくていくら水をまいても全然ダメで育ったとしても痩せ細ったのしかできなくて
この土なるほどなこんな土ではいくら水をまいてもすぐに吸い込んでしまうしかもこうも痩せていては作物は満足に育たないだろう
だから結局諦めるしかなくてそのままなんです
そうか何度も手を加えた後きっと最後まで諦めきれなかったんだなだがこれならなんとかなるかもしれない
それではそろそろ行きましょうか
ああ恩返しというわけではないがやってみるかおどこからともなくいい匂いがすきっ腹に響くいい匂いだなそういえばゆうべ粥を軽く口に入れただけで何も食べてなかったな
おーすごいでしょう晩ご飯はごちそうなんだからさあアルルも並べるの手伝ってうんあ白オロさんご飯ですからそこに座って待っててください
ああありがとう蒸した芋のようなもの器に盛られた煮物焼いた小魚団子菜のおひたし漬物
奮発したの
白オロさんの回復祝いだもの
自分
それでは みんなが揃ったところでいただこうかね。
やーな神、いつも恵みをありがとうございます。御神、御座にみてやに感謝を。
あ、感謝。
いただきます。
いただきます。
いただきます。この芋のようなものをこのタレにつけたりおかずと一緒に食べたりするのか。
白オロさん、モロロのおかわりがありますから、いっぱい食べてください。
ああ、ありがとう。この芋のようなのはモロロというのか。ゆうべのおかゆはこのモロロのおかゆだったんだな。これは美味しいな。
どうですか？
ああ、うまいよ。
よかった。
もしかしてエルルが？
アルルはもうダメ。一人でそんなに食べたら。でもまだある。それは白オロさんの。アルルの分はちゃんとあったでしょ。一個だけ。ダメよ。半分。ダメったら。
ああ、自分なら構わないから。
でもダメです。病み上がりなんだからいっぱい食べないと。
気持ちはありがたいが。ああ、いや、自分はこれだけで十分だから。ほら、アルル、いらないのかい？うわっ、素早い。一瞬の隙に持っていかれた。
すみません。もうあの子ったら。どうぞこれ食べてください。
いや、それはエルルのじゃないか。私なら本当にいいんだ。
でも
私はいいからエルルが食べてくれ。
はい。
なんか物陰からじっとこっちを見てるよ。
ところでお前さん、これから先どうするつもりかい？
それは
前にも言うたが、何も思い出せんのでは行くあても帰るところもなかろうって。
それは気持ちはとても嬉しいのですが、いいんですか、見ず知らずの私なんかを。
ええ、困った時はお互い様じゃって。第一、まだ傷も癒えとらんそんな体では満足に動けんじゃろう。
ですが
何かまわんよ。生きていくだけの糧はヤナウン神が恵んでくださる。一人二人増えたところで変わらんから気にすることはないで。エルル、アルル、お前たちもそれで構わないじゃろ。アルルもそれでええか？ええ子じゃな。
ありがとうございます。この恩は忘れません。
ええんじゃよ。わしらは互いに助け合う。当たり前のことじゃ。この辺境の地は世辞にも豊かとはいえ、だからこそわしらは助け合わねばならん。皆が助け合わねば生きてゆけぬからの。そうそう、わしは一応ここの村長ということになった。もし何かあったら遠慮なく言うといい。
しかし本当に自分は何者なんだろうな。 あ、眠くなってきたな。少し疲れた。あれこれ考えても仕方ないか。今はとにかく眠い。後のことはまた今度考え。
このこいつらしつけえ。あ、じゃあなんかやべえぞ。
思ったより手強い。おやさん、こいつらって弱いんじゃなかったんですか？
誰もそんなこと言ってねえって。
じゃあ今までこいつらを退治したこととか
ね
え
初めてだ。何しろこいつらすぐに逃げるからな。
しまった。あ、エル、何しに出てきた？
私もやります。
何言ってる？危険だから下がれ。
私簡単な手当てくらいはできます。だから。
いいから下がるんだ。
でも
エルル、こっちに頼ま。
おやっさん。
あんちゃん、こんな時にお前は俺が命に変えてでも守ってやるって抜かすのが男ってもんだ。それによ、この状況、後ろ盾がねえと冗談抜きでやべえ。
絶対に自分たちのそばから離れるな。
大丈夫か？
ええ、なんとか。
やれやれ、なんとか片付いたな。
危なかった。正直エルルーがいなかったらどうなっていたか。
ごめんなさい。その出しゃばったことして。
いや、参ったな。確かに危険な真似をしたのは感心できないが、エルルーがいなかったら危なかったのは事実だ。危ない真似をしたことを叱るべきか、よくやったと褒めるべきか。こんな場合なんて言ったらいい？いや、その、まあ、
二人して何血しくり合ってんだ。さっさと戻ろうぜ。
父